But the very nature of it and the many mysteries that remain have also ratcheted up the interest in the case that has now been open for almost 2 weeks. Thousands of public tips have poured in, providing all levels of law enforcement with leads to chase down. There is a $100,000, $141,000 reward for information, desperate pleas from her family to her alleged kidnappers, and new grainy video that might unlock it all. The small county sheriff's department called in the Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, and U.S. President Donald Trump has even weighed in, cryptically remarking that we could have some answers coming up very soon, without providing further details. But for it to be a kidnapping, this case is missing something rather vital. To target a famous family, violently seize their matriarch and hold her hostage, a perpetrator would be expected to also issue clear demands for what they want in exchange for her release and exactly how to deliver it. But that has not happened. What was thought to be a ransom request, police now say turned out to be a cruel, opportunistic hoax. And as the days have dragged on, Nancy Guthrie's family, as well as law enforcement, are without a regular and clear way to contact the people who might have taken her. So what initially seemed like a high-profile kidnapping that might be resolved with a multimillion-dollar bank transfer has now morphed into something else and, as former investigators have explained, it might be the combination of intense public interest and gumshoe detective work that solves it. The very unusual factor in the Nancy Guthrie missing person case. It was meant to be a night like any other, spent eating and laughing in the company of family. On January 31st, Nancy Guthrie visited her daughter, Annie, and played games at her house before she was driven home by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. He watched from his car as she walked to her garage and safely entered her house in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. Police told the New York Times. It was one of those everyday occurrences that would not have been all that memorable, had it not been the last time anyone saw or heard from Nancy Guthrie. Not long after she was dropped off and entered her property, the 84-year-old disappeared. We know she didn't just walk out of there, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later said in a press conference. She did not leave on her own. Family members grew concerned when friends told them Nancy failed to show up for a virtual Sunday church service the next morning and reported her missing that afternoon. She was taken, and we don't know where. Nancy's daughter, Savannah, said in a video update last week. The story of the missing mother spread quickly online, particularly in the corners of the internet with an unquenchable appetite for true crime. Savannah Guthrie is the co-anchor of one of the highest-rating morning television shows in the United States. She is beamed into Americans' living rooms every morning, and her fame has fueled the nation's obsession with her mother's disappearance. Nancy was taken out of her home. Authorities believe Nancy Guthrie went missing during a 41-minute window in the early morning of February 1st, about 4 hours after she said goodbye to her son-in-law. It was sometime between 1:47 a.m., when her doorbell camera was disabled, and 2:28 a.m., when authorities said the app on her pacemaker disconnected from her phone. Family members arrived at Nancy's home many hours later, at 11:56 a.m., after they were tipped off that the 84-year-old had not made it to a church service. Minutes later, a call was made to 911. The items they found inside were the first sign something was wrong. Her phone, wallet, hearing aid, daily medication, and car were all left behind, and there was evidence of forced entry at her house. DNA tests of blood found on her front porch came back as a match for her, police said. We believe she was taken out of the home against her will, and that's how this investigation is moving, Sheriff Nanos said on NBC on February 2. Over the following days, the quiet street in Tucson where Nancy lived erupted with activity. The desert-bound neighborhood is famed for its sparse landscape, fan-like cacti, and breathtaking views of the Santa Catalina Mountains. But as law enforcement officers picked through the shrubbery surrounding Nancy's home in search of a lead, the area attracted a new level of notoriety, drawing with it a throng of journalists and camera operators. They watched as the yellow tape around Nancy's front porch was put up, pulled down, and put back up again. It's unusual because we really haven't had a kidnapping like this in a long, long time. One that's involving a celebrity family. Michael Alcazar, a former NYPD detective and adjunct professor of criminal justice at the John Jay College in New York City, told the ABC. It's a circus now. They released the crime scene. The media has been walking all over the crime scene. Now they're looking in the backyard and the desert very close to Nancy's residence. They're kind of doing it in reverse. About the decision to close the area to the public, reopen it and close it again, Sheriff Nanos said, "At the start of this thing, we weren't sure what we had." In the days following Nancy's disappearance, the sheriff's department picked up the phone to the FBI. The agency has federal jurisdiction to investigate kidnappings across the U.S. This became law in 1932 after the baby son of world-renowned aviator Charles Lindbergh was snatched from the family's sprawling New Jersey estate in what was dubbed the crime of the century. When the FBI arrived in Pima County, it brought with it technical and forensic expertise in abundance. Former FBI executive and experienced investigator of abduction cases Catherine Schweit told the ABC the celebrity factor would put the local sheriff under a magnifying glass. As a longtime FBI person, we're used to being under a magnifying glass and every movement we make is tracked. The local sheriff may be less expecting to have 100 different media outlets standing in front of them at a press conference, she said. It's really a big jigsaw puzzle. And that's very typical of every investigation where we're simply looking for a bad guy. One piece is the perpetrator themselves. Another is the element of ransom and a family wondering what it will take to bring their missing loved one home. The gap in the case. American Today show host Savannah Guthrie is well-loved and, as one of NBC's top on-air talents, it is well known she has a multi-million-dollar contract. The family has a connection to Australia, with Savannah born in Melbourne in the early 1970s. Nancy, her husband Charles, and their 3 children lived in Australia for a few years before returning to the U.S. and settling in Arizona. The family put down roots, and as Savannah ascended to one of the most sought-after roles in American television, her mother stayed in Tucson. Nancy's disappearance has some peculiarities that set the case apart from what might be expected of a high-profile kidnapping in which the entire point is to get rich from ransom. The 2 apparent ransom letters were sent to media outlets and were inconsistent in their requests. That immediately placed doubt over the letters and who sent them. One was to a local news station. The other went to Los Angeles-based tabloid celebrity news outlet TMZ and reportedly included a demand for millions of dollars paid in Bitcoin. The issue for investigators is there is no proof of life and no specific information about how a kidnapper could be contacted. During her time at the FBI, Ms. Schweit investigated the case of an 88-year-old woman who was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. For 24 hours, there was no contact with the family, but then the kidnappers reached out. We had a kidnapper who then contacted the grandson and then contacted the father, and we had this back-and-forth communication, as this person sought to get what they wanted out of the deal, which was financial benefit, she said. We don't have that here. Mr. Alcazar agreed, saying the ransom notes were probably a hoax. Because it was odd. You're demanding a ransom, but it's only a one-way communication, so how are we supposed to get back to you, right? He said. Unless they're dictating in the ransom, deliver this money and deliver it in this account, and that's it. No one's going to go for that. We have to verify proof of life, proof of custody, and that's why it was unusual. And I think that's why even Savannah perhaps doesn't believe those people had custody of Nancy. It was just another part of it that complicated this case. In recent days, the FBI has said it was still investigating the legitimacy of the ransom notes, noting they referenced publicly available information about Nancy Guthrie. The FBI also announced it had made an arrest related to an imposter ransom demand associated with the case. With no direct communication from apparent kidnappers, investigators go back to working the case, one piece of evidence and one tip-off at a time. And unlocking the video from Nancy Guthrie's front door camera provided the huge advance the case was needing. The masked person at the door. The black and white videos and photographs of a potentially armed person wearing gloves, a dark jacket, a backpack, and a ski mask with holes for the eyes and mouth are grainy and disturbing. They are also the only visuals authorities have released of a potential suspect in the disappearance. The images taken by a doorbell camera next to Nancy's front door on the morning she went missing were posted earlier this week by FBI Director Kash Patel and swiftly hailed as a breakthrough. Sheriff Nanos initially cast doubt on whether authorities could obtain footage taken that night because the Nest camera was disabled around the same time Nancy went missing. Mr. Patel confirmed the photos, along with 2 videos, were recovered 8 days later with the help of private sector partners from residual data located in back-end systems. In one of the videos, which goes for 29 seconds, the masked person, who appears to be carrying a gun, is seen approaching the front door, while another 14-second video shows the individual covering the door's camera with a plant the suspect took from the garden.